Daniel Brooks was not a man who liked crowds or noise. He preferred the quiet of the forest, where the only sounds were the rustling of leaves and the calls of birds. For many years, he worked as a wildlife photographer, traveling alone to capture rare and beautiful animals in their natural homes. His cabin was far from the nearest town, hidden deep in the Oregon woods. He liked it that way. The silence and the peacefulness gave him time to think, to focus on his work, and to feel free. One chilly evening, Daniel decided to go on one of his regular night hikes. He had heard rumors about a rare owl that lived only in a small part of the forest. No one had seen it for months, and Daniel hoped he might get a chance to photograph it. He packed his camera, some snacks, and a small flashlight, and set off into the dark woods. The moon was full, and the light from the stars made the trees look mysterious and magical. As Daniel walked deeper into the forest, the sounds of the night surrounded him. Owls hooted in the distance, small animals scurried through the underbrush, and the wind gently whispered through the branches above. He moved carefully, stepping over roots and rocks, trying to stay as quiet as possible so he wouldn't scare away the wildlife. Every now and then, he stopped to listen, hoping to hear the faint call of the elusive owl. Suddenly, something unusual caught his eye. Ahead, a soft glow shimmered between the trees. It was not like the moonlight or the glow of fireflies. This light seemed strange, almost unnatural. Curious and cautious, Daniel approached slowly. As he got closer, the glow grew brighter, and he saw what looked like a small crash site. There were pieces of metal and strange shapes scattered on the ground, glowing softly in the darkness. Daniel's heart began to race. He had never seen anything like this before. The air smelled faintly of something metallic and strange, unlike anything he had ever smelled in the forest. He carefully stepped over the debris, looking for any signs of life. Then, to his shock, he saw her. There, lying on the ground near the wreckage, was a woman. But she was unlike any woman Daniel had ever seen. Her skin was pale but shimmered with a silver-blue hue, and her eyes were large, shining with many colors that seemed to change every few seconds. Her hair floated gently, even though there was no wind. She looked hurt, her clothes torn, and a strange glowing fluid was coming from a wound on her arm. Daniel felt a mix of fear and concern. Who was she? Where did she come from? How had she ended up here in the middle of the forest? Despite his shock, he knew he couldn't leave her there. He carefully picked her up in his arms. She was surprisingly light, almost like she weighed nothing at all. As he carried her, she barely made a sound, but he could feel her breathing, shallow but steady. The journey back to his cabin was slow and difficult. The forest was dark, and the path was rough. Daniel held her close, trying to keep her warm and safe. His mind raced with questions, but for now, he focused only on getting her to shelter. When he reached his cabin, Daniel laid her gently on the bed. He had no idea what to do next. He was a photographer, not a doctor. But he remembered some first aid from a course he had taken long ago. He looked at the wound on her arm and carefully cleaned it with water from a bottle. The glowing fluid stopped flowing after a while, and her breathing became a little steadier. The woman's eyes slowly opened. They fixed on Daniel with a strange intensity, but there was no fear. Instead, she looked at him as if she knew him somehow. Or maybe she was just trying to understand this new world she had landed in. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Only soft musical sounds that Daniel couldn't understand. He realized that she was hurt and scared, and he was the only one who could help her. Over the next few hours, Daniel made a fire, warmed some soup, and sat by her side, hoping she would recover. As he watched her, he noticed that she was different in many ways, but also fragile and human in others. Her breathing was uneven, but she didn't seem to be in pain anymore. Throughout the night, Daniel's mind wandered between disbelief and wonder. Could this woman really be from another world? Was this some kind of dream or hallucination caused by loneliness in the forest? Yet everything he saw and felt told him she was real. He thought about his life, how quiet and empty it had become over the years. He had spent so much time alone, searching for meaning in nature and through his photographs. But now, here was someone who needed him, someone who might change everything. By dawn, the woman was sleeping peacefully, and Daniel felt a strange calm settle over him. He knew that whatever this was, his life was no longer going to be the same. The injured alien woman he had carried from the woods was the beginning of a story he never could have imagined. A story that would test everything he believed about the world, about life, and about himself. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt hope. After the long, tiring night when Daniel had found the strange woman in the forest and carried her back to his cabin, the next few days passed in a strange mix of hope and uncertainty. The woman, whom he now quietly called Lyra, because her eyes reminded him of stars, started to show signs of improvement. She was still very weak, but the strange wound that had glowed and bled silvery fluid was slowly healing. Daniel watched her closely, every day bringing small but important changes. At first, Lyra barely communicated. She didn't speak any words Daniel could understand. Instead, she made soft, musical sounds, like the wind blowing through chimes, or a song from some distant place. The sounds were beautiful but mysterious. Daniel tried talking to her in English, hoping to get any kind of response, but she only looked at him with those deep, shifting eyes. Sometimes she smiled faintly, which made Daniel feel more hopeful. Slowly, something extraordinary happened. Daniel noticed that when he spoke, she seemed to understand him, not just with her eyes, but with her mind. It was as if her thoughts and feelings were reaching out to him without words. This was a new and strange experience for Daniel, who had spent most of his life surrounded by animals and trees, not people who could talk without speaking. One morning, as sunlight poured gently through the cabin window, Lyra's eyes flashed with a new light. Daniel was sitting nearby when suddenly a voice echoed in his mind. It wasn't loud or clear, but a gentle, calm voice that said, "Thank you." Daniel almost jumped, shocked to realize the woman was communicating telepathically. He felt a strange warmth in his chest. The loneliness he had lived with for so long began to fade. Here was someone who could connect with him, not just through language, but through feelings and thoughts. Over the next days, their silent conversations became longer. Lyra showed Daniel images in his mind, scenes of distant stars, vast cities of light, and strange landscapes filled with colors he had never seen. Through these visions, Daniel learned that Lyra was from a place far beyond Earth. Her people lived in a peaceful civilization orbiting a star that was dying slowly. Their world was filled with light and knowledge, but it was not without danger. Lyra had fled because powerful enemies wanted to capture her. They betrayed her people and destroyed parts of her home. She had escaped on a small ship, hoping to find safety. Daniel listened, amazed and a little afraid. It was hard to believe such things were real. He had always thought life on Earth was the only life that mattered. Now he was faced with the truth that the universe was much bigger and more complicated than he had ever imagined. But the danger was real too. Strange things began to happen around Daniel's cabin. He noticed unfamiliar cars driving slowly on the dirt roads nearby. People in dark suits appeared at the edges of the forest, watching silently. Sometimes there were strange noises at night, low hums, like machines far away. Daniel's peaceful life was changing fast, and he knew it. It was because of Lyra. One evening, while Daniel was preparing a simple dinner, Lyra's expression grew tense. Through their mental connection, she shared a warning. The people chasing her had tracked her to Earth. They were coming closer. Daniel felt a cold wave of fear. His small cabin in the woods, once a safe haven, was now a place under threat. He decided he had to protect Lyra no matter what. Daniel was no stranger to danger. Years in the wild had taught him how to be careful. But this was something new. The enemies were not animals or natural dangers. They were people with strange technology and weapons. Daniel knew he needed to act fast. He began to prepare the cabin for defense. He moved heavy furniture to block windows and doors and set up old traps he had used to keep wild animals away. He also gathered supplies, food, water, first aid, and made a plan to escape if necessary. Despite the fear, Daniel never left Lyra's side. He cared for her as she healed and grew stronger. Her skin, once pale and shimmering, began to glow softly, almost like a light inside her body. Daniel realized that her strength was returning, but so was her power. Power unlike anything he had ever seen. Lyra's eyes could flash bright light, and sometimes she would touch an object, and it would move or change without anyone touching it. Daniel watched in awe as she demonstrated these strange abilities. At times she looked exhausted afterward, as if using these powers drained her energy. But Daniel never asked too many questions. He wanted to respect her privacy and trust. Instead, he focused on helping her rest and regain her strength. Sometimes they would sit by the fire in the evenings, sharing quiet moments. Daniel showed her pictures of Earth, of animals and places he loved. Lyra, in return, shared memories of her world, a place of peace and beauty, but also of conflict and loss. One day, as they sat together watching the stars from the cabin's porch, Lyra's voice came softly into Daniel's mind again. She told him more about her people's way of life, how they valued knowledge, harmony, and protecting all living things. She explained that her journey to Earth was not just to escape, but to find help. The betrayal that destroyed her home was not over. There were still those who wanted to conquer and control. Daniel felt a deep sense of responsibility. He was an ordinary man, living a quiet life in the woods. But now he was part of something much bigger. Protecting Lyra meant protecting a whole world he had never known. As the days passed, Daniel learned to trust Lyra more. He realized that the woman in his cabin was not just a stranger or an alien. She was someone brave and kind, carrying a heavy burden but full of hope. Their bond grew stronger, built on understanding, care, and the need to survive. But with the threat of the agents closing in, Daniel's peaceful life was disappearing fast. He had no idea how much this woman would change his world, how much. He would be drawn into a fight far beyond the forests of Oregon, and Lyra had no idea how much she would need Daniel's strength in the days to come. After many days of hiding and healing, Daniel and Lyra felt a fragile peace inside the small cabin deep in the woods. Lyra was growing stronger, and Daniel was learning more about her strange, otherworldly powers. But beneath the calm surface, danger was closing in fast. The agents, men in black suits with serious faces and cold eyes, were getting closer to finding them. Daniel had seen their cars driving slowly on the dirt roads and had noticed strange devices left near the cabin. It was clear they were being watched, and soon, Daniel feared, the agents would come in force. One night, the fear he had been trying to push away came rushing back with a terrifying force. The sky was dark and heavy with clouds, and the wind howled through the trees like a warning. Daniel was sitting near the window watching the shadows move outside when suddenly, headlights pierced the darkness. Several black SUVs appeared, moving slowly toward the cabin, their engines low and threatening. Daniel's heart pounded. He ran to warn Lyra, who was resting on the bed, her eyes opened wide, glowing softly in the dim light. She didn't need to say anything. Daniel could feel her tension like a storm in his mind. The men were here and they were coming to take her. Without wasting a second, Daniel helped Lyra to her feet. Despite her injuries, she moved quickly and silently. They didn't have much time. Daniel quickly moved furniture and closed windows, trying to block every way the agents could enter. But the agents were trained, and they had tools far beyond anything Daniel had faced before. Suddenly, the front door burst open with a loud crash. Men in black suits rushed inside, their faces serious and eyes scanning for any sign of the woman they were hunting. Daniel stood in front of Lyra, ready to protect her, but he knew it would not be easy. The men were armed with strange devices, guns that shot beams of light instead of bullets, nets that glowed and could trap anything they touched. Lyra stepped forward, and Daniel saw her change. Her calm face became fierce, her eyes blazing with light. The air around her seemed to shimmer, and suddenly she was not just a fragile woman. She was powerful and otherworldly. She lifted her hand, and one of the agents was thrown backward by an invisible force crashing against the wall. Another agent tried to fire his weapon, but Lyra raised a hand, and the beam of light bent and disappeared. Daniel watched in awe. and fear. He had never seen anything like this before. Lyra was using her powers to defend them, but it was clear that she was tired and weak. Every move seemed to drain her energy, but she did not stop. She was fighting not only for her own life, but for Daniel's too. Despite their strength, the agents were many, and Daniel knew they could not hold them off forever. Thinking quickly, he grabbed Lyra's hand and pulled her toward a hidden door, behind a bookshelf, a secret escape he had discovered years ago but had never needed before. The door led to a narrow tunnel that wound deep under the forest. As they slipped through the dark tunnel, Daniel's mind raced. Where would they go? How would they survive? But Lyra's grip was steady, and her presence gave him courage. The tunnel was long and damp, and they moved quietly, careful not to make a sound that would reveal their escape. Finally, they emerged in a small clearing surrounded by thick trees. The night was still dark, but the stars shone brightly overhead. Daniel looked around. They were far from the cabin now, deeper in the wilderness where few people ever came. It was safer for the moment. Lyra's breathing was heavy, and Daniel could see the exhaustion on her face. But she smiled at him, a smile full of gratitude and strength. "Thank you," she said softly in his mind. For hours, they hid in the forest, moving quietly through the shadows. Daniel knew they couldn't stay in one place for long. The agents would search the area, and they needed a plan. Lyra, despite her fatigue, used her powers to create small illusions, images of herself appearing in different places, to confuse their pursuers. As they traveled, Daniel learned more about the true danger Lyra faced. The agents were not just ordinary humans. They were part of a secret organization that wanted to capture her for reasons beyond Daniel's understanding. They believed her powers could be used to control and dominate, and they were willing to go to any length to get her. Daniel felt the weight of this knowledge. He was an ordinary man, but now he was part of a story far bigger than himself. Protecting Lyra was no longer just about helping a stranger. It was about standing against a powerful enemy who threatened not only her life, but possibly the fate of many others. At times, the journey was exhausting. The forest was thick and sometimes dangerous, with wild animals and rough terrain. But Daniel and Lyra moved with purpose, each step bringing them closer to safety, or so they hoped. During one quiet moment by a small stream, Daniel helped Lyra wash the dirt and blood from her wounds. As he worked, she showed him a new power, a gentle healing light that she could summon from her hands. The wounds on her arm began to close and fade before his eyes. Daniel realized just how extraordinary she truly was. Despite the danger, moments like these made Daniel feel connected to Lyra in a way he never expected. He saw her not just as an alien or a stranger, but as someone who needed him, who trusted him. And he trusted her. But even as they found brief peace in the wilderness, Daniel knew the agents were still out there, searching, hunting. The black SUVs would return, and the secret organization would not give up easily. One night, as they camped under the stars, Lyra revealed more about her people and her world. She told Daniel about her home planet, a beautiful place filled with light and advanced technology, but also danger and betrayal. Her people had been peaceful, but enemies had risen within their society, wanting power at any cost. Lyra had escaped to Earth to protect herself and the secrets she carried. Daniel listened, fascinated and humbled. The universe was far bigger and more complicated than he had ever imagined. And now he was part of this story, caught between worlds. As the days passed, their bond grew stronger. They relied on each other for strength and hope. Daniel's fear slowly turned into determination. He was ready to fight for Lyra, to protect her at all costs. But the agents were relentless. They closed in, using drones and trackers that made it almost impossible to hide. Daniel and Lyra had to move faster and smarter, using every trick they knew to stay one step ahead. Despite the danger, Daniel found moments of beauty and wonder. In the quiet of the forest, he and Lyra shared stories, hopes and dreams. She taught him about the stars, about light and energy in ways he never understood before. And Daniel showed her the simple pleasures of Earth, the feel of the wind, the sound of birds, the warmth of a campfire. Their journey was a mixture of fear and hope, danger and discovery. Daniel had never imagined his life would change so suddenly. But now he could not imagine it any other way. The night the agents finally caught up to them again was filled with tension and courage. Daniel stood by Lyra's side, ready to face whatever came next. Together, they were no longer just a man and an alien woman. They were partners fighting for survival, for freedom, and for a future that no one could predict. The escape through the hidden tunnel was only the beginning. What lay ahead was uncertain, but Daniel and Lyra were determined to face it together, no matter what the cost. After narrowly escaping the agents who had stormed Daniel's cabin and chased them through the forest, Daniel and Lyra found themselves in a world that felt both familiar and completely changed. The quiet life Daniel had once known was gone. Now every step they took, every breath they drew was filled with the tension of being hunted. But in the midst of this fear and danger, something unexpected was growing, a strong bond between the man and the alien woman. They had left the cabin far behind, moving deeper into the wilderness where no roads or towns could lead their pursuers, directly to them. Daniel's knowledge of the forest became their greatest advantage. He knew where the thickest bushes were, which paths were hidden, and how to find fresh water. But Lyra's powers added a new layer of protection. She could sense danger before it appeared, and sometimes she used her abilities to create illusions that fooled even the most careful trackers. One cold morning, as the sun rose softly behind the trees, Daniel and Lyra found shelter in a small cave hidden behind a waterfall. The roar of the falling water was loud, masking any sound they might make. It was a perfect place to rest and regroup. They had been traveling for days, always on the move, and both were exhausted. Daniel watched Lyra as she sat quietly on a smooth rock inside the cave. Her eyes were closed, her breathing steady. Despite the calm outside, he knew her mind was far away, thinking of her distant home and the danger that still loomed. Daniel felt a deep urge to comfort her, to let her know she was not alone. Slowly, he reached out and took her hand in his. Lyra opened her eyes, surprised but grateful. For a moment, they simply held hands, sharing a quiet connection that words could not describe. It was as if their hearts were speaking directly to each other. Daniel realized that this journey was changing him, not just physically but emotionally. He was no longer the solitary man he had been before. As they rested in the cave, Daniel asked Lyra more about her world and the people chasing her. Through their telepathic connection, she revealed a history full of beauty and tragedy. Her planet, called Lumina, was once a shining beacon of peace and advanced knowledge. The Luminians lived in harmony with their environment, using their incredible technology to protect their world and help each other grow. But not all was perfect. A group of powerful beings, jealous and greedy, sought to control Lumina's resources and power. They started a conflict that tore the planet apart. Lyra was part of a group trying to stop the destruction, but they were betrayed from within. She escaped just before her world was nearly destroyed, hoping to find help on Earth. Daniel listened intently, feeling the weight of her story. It was a story of hope, loss, and courage, a story he now shared. He realized that protecting Lyra meant more than saving one life. It was about standing for what was right and fighting against forces of darkness. The next challenge came sooner than they expected. While they rested, a group of agents tracked their location using advanced technology. The agents were relentless, and Daniel knew they had little time. He helped Lyra gather what they needed quickly, and they slipped away from the cave just as the first agents arrived. The escape was dangerous. They moved through thick underbrush, climbed steep hills, and crossed cold streams. Daniel's muscles ached, and Lyra's strength was tested, but they kept going. Every time they thought they were safe, another shadow appeared, a drone buzzing overhead or a figure watching from the trees. One night, as they camped under a blanket of stars, Daniel shared a rare smile. He told Lyra about his life before. All this, the quiet days alone in the cabin, the wildlife photography, the peaceful forest. Lyra listened with wide eyes, fascinated by the simplicity of his world. In return, Lyra shared memories of Lumina's glowing cities, where buildings shimmered with light and people moved with grace and kindness. She told him about the music of her people, songs that could heal wounds and bring peace to troubled hearts. Daniel imagined the beauty of such a place and felt a longing to see it for himself. Despite the danger and exhaustion, these moments of sharing brought them closer. They were no longer just a man and an alien woman. They were companions, friends, and something more. Daniel's heart, once closed off by years of solitude, began to open. But the threat never left. One day, while moving through a narrow valley, they were ambushed. Agents surrounded them with weapons glowing and ready. Daniel instinctively stepped in front of Lyra, prepared to fight or surrender to protect her. Lyra's eyes blazed with power. She lifted her hands, and a wave of energy pushed the agents back, giving them a chance to escape. Daniel marveled at her strength but feared for her safety. Using her powers so much made her weak afterward. They ran until their lungs burned and their legs ached. When they finally stopped, Lyra collapsed, exhausted. Daniel held her gently, comforting her with quiet words and steady hands. He promised he would protect her no matter what. In the following days, Daniel made a decision. They could not keep running forever. They needed a plan, a way to fight back and stop the agents from hunting Lyra. He began using his skills from years in the wild to set traps and create safe spots where they could rest without fear. Lyra, recovering her strength, practiced controlling her powers. She taught Daniel small things: how to sense energy, how to move quietly, how to stay calm in fear. Daniel was a quick learner, and their training sessions became moments of hope and laughter amid the darkness. Their journey took them further, from the cabin and deeper into unknown lands. Along the way, they met a few people who believed their story and offered help. Some were scientists fascinated by Lyra's abilities. Others were activists who dreamed of a better world and wanted to stand against the secret organization hunting her. These new friends became allies, and Daniel felt a surge of hope. Maybe they could win this fight. Maybe they could save Lyra and through her protect the future of many worlds. Yet Daniel never forgot the cost of their journey. Every step was dangerous, every night uncertain. He saw the pain in Lyra's eyes, the sadness of a lost home, the weight of responsibility, and the fear of what might come. One evening, sitting by a campfire, Daniel looked at Lyra and said softly, "We'll get through this. Together." Lyra smiled, a smile filled with trust and gratitude. "Together," she echoed. Their story was far from over. The battles ahead would be harder, the dangers greater. But Daniel and Lyra were ready to face them, united by courage, friendship, and hope. After many days and nights of running, hiding, and fighting, Daniel and Lyra knew the moment of truth had arrived. The chase, the fear, and the uncertainty were coming to a head. The secret organization hunting Lyra was closing in, but Daniel and Lyra were no longer just scared and confused. They were strong, united, and ready to face whatever came next. They had built something powerful during their journey, a bond of trust and friendship that went beyond words. Daniel, the simple man who lived alone in the woods, had changed. He was now a protector, a fighter, and a partner to Lyra, the alien woman whose very presence challenged everything he had ever known about life and the universe. The final confrontation was not something they wanted, but it was inevitable. The organization had sent their most skilled agents, armed with the latest technology and weapons designed to capture or destroy. But Daniel and Lyra had something the agents did not understand: courage and the will to fight for what was right, as a Nye. They prepared. Daniel studied the maps and information they had gathered from their allies. They found a remote place, an old abandoned research facility hidden deep in the mountains. It was the perfect location to make their stand, a place where they could use the environment to their advantage and where Lyra's powers could be at their strongest. Daniel and Lyra spent hours planning. They set traps and barriers, prepared escape routes, and made sure they had enough supplies. They knew the agents would come in force, but they believed in their strength and in each other. On the day of the battle, the sky was gray and heavy with clouds, as if the weather itself sensed the coming storm. Daniel and Lyra stood side by side at the entrance of the facility, their hearts pounding but their minds clear. When the agents arrived, it was with a sudden, overwhelming force. Black vehicles rolled up the mountain road, and dozens of men in dark suits poured out, moving quickly and silently. Their weapons glowed with dangerous energy, and their faces were cold and determined. Daniel felt a surge of fear, but he pushed it aside. He looked at Lyra, whose eyes shone with fierce light. She was ready. The battle began with a burst of energy from Lyra. She raised her hands, and a powerful shield of shimmering light surrounded them, blocking the agents' first attack. Daniel moved quickly, using his knowledge of the terrain to lead the agents into traps they had set earlier. The fight was intense. The agents were skilled and well prepared, but Daniel and Lyra's determination and teamwork gave them the upper hand. Lyra used her powers to disable the agents' weapons and create illusions that confused and scared them. Daniel used his quick thinking and strength to protect Lyra and strike when the agents least expected it. In the middle of the battle, one of the lead agents confronted Lyra directly. He was tall and fierce, his eyes filled with hatred. He revealed the true reason for the chase. The organization wanted to capture Lyra's power to control entire worlds, to bend others to their will. Lyra stood her ground, her light growing brighter and stronger. She spoke quietly but firmly. "You will never control me or my people." The agent sneered and raised his weapon, but before he could fire, Daniel stepped between them, blocking the shot with his body. Pain exploded through Daniel's arm, but he didn't fall. His courage inspired Lyra, and together they fought back with all their might. As the battle raged on, Daniel noticed a strange device among the agents, a small, glowing orb that seemed to pulse with energy. He realized it was the source of their power, a machine designed to weaken Lyra's abilities. Daniel knew he had to destroy it. With a burst of speed and bravery, Daniel ran toward the orb, dodging beams and blasts. Lyra covered him with a shield, pushing back the agents trying to stop him. Daniel reached the device and smashed it against a rock. The orb shattered, releasing a bright light that momentarily blinded everyone. With the device destroyed, Lyra's power surged. She lifted her hands, and a wave of energy spread out, knocking the agents back and forcing them to retreat. The remaining attackers fled into the forest, defeated for now. Daniel and Lyra stood together, breathing heavily but victorious. The danger was not over, but this battle had changed everything. They had shown the organization that Lyra would never be controlled, and that together, they were stronger than any force that tried to divide them. In the quiet after the fight, Daniel looked at Lyra and saw not just an alien woman, but a true friend and partner. She smiled back, her eyes soft and full of hope. Their journey was far from over, but they were ready for whatever came next. They had faced fear, pain, and darkness, and had come through stronger. They knew that no matter what challenges awaited, they would face them together. As the sun began to rise, casting light over the mountains, Daniel and Lyra walked forward side by side. The world was vast and full of mysteries, but they were no longer alone. They had found each other, and in that they had found a new beginning.